What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Skyfall sessions. Let's get into a debate. This is Ben Shapiro, who's, of course, a right-winger, going up against 25 different left-wingers or Kamala Harris supporters. So I like the way Jubilee sets up their debates. I like to commentate on these, so I'll be doing some fact-checking and, a little bit of commentary. But that being said, let's get right into it.
Why, hello there. I'm Ben Shapiro, and I'm co-founder of the Daily Wire and host of The Ben Shapiro Show. And today, I'm surrounded by 25 Kamala Harris supporters. My first claim is Kamala Harris's attempts to put DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion at the center of her policies is destructive.
Okay, so I guess we already got a fact check since Ben Shapiro is starting off with an ill foundation. So first of all, there's nothing that substantially supports that Kamala Harris's policies are DEI based. That's kind of a Republican talking point. She, however, does have social equity and justice focused policies. They're not necessarily focused directly on diversity and equity, but they indirectly support DEI because they're progressive policies that will help all of the American people. So while she doesn't directly support DEI, she indirectly does. So his premise is already flawed. So let's see what they say.
How's it going, dude? Where do I get one of those hats?
Oh, my boy made it for me.
Nice.
So yeah, first of all, we're standing on stolen indigenous Tongva land, right? This is.
Are you moving anytime soon?
Land? No, but
Why?
The fact of the matter is I'm born and raised California. We're talking about diversity, equity, and vision.
Okay, Ben Shapiro is so frustrating. I want to set the premise here that Ben Shapiro is an expert debater who makes a living off of debating people and defending his talking points. So he has a major advantage here against these relatively, what I'm assuming are normal people. We'll see how they respond. But I must fact check Ben Shapiro whenever he says his silliness.
We should.
So why don't
we
you?
Absolutely
you
should.
could do it today, right now.
Great.
So
we should, but that's not my point here. The point is you're saying that...
See, he's already creating a straw man to an extent by attacking a point that this guy's not even making.
Diversity, equity, inclusion is destructive.
Yes.
Right. So when we look at this country that is built off the backs of slavery and white supremacy, taking the lead, building the roots and foundations of everything that you know and believe today, it's ironic to see a Black and Indian woman who's rising up to the occasion against society, pushing them down. And this isn't just the fact that they're Black and Indian and a woman.
That's gonna be a way in for Ben Shapiro. I'm telling you right now, this guy knows how to debate.
It's the fact that
Can you give me an example of how society pushed Kamala Harris down, please?
There it is.
The demographic of people is what I'm talking about.
Well, yeah, but you suggested that Kamala Harris is being pushed down by society.
I'm not suggesting that. No.
I mean, that's
So
like,
my point is saying.
Okay, so again, I'm going to be fair and impartial. He kind of did suggest that by making the preface that Kamala Harris is an Indian and Black woman, and that Black and Indian people are pushed down by society. Therefore, he did actually make that claim. But that's, again, it's not that the guy on the right is wrong. It's just that he's not a professional debater, and Ben Shapiro was looking for any instance to jab at him, and he found it. I knew he was going to do it.
I'm sorry, you've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
Good to meet you. Whoa. Man.
Hey, Ben.
Hey, how's it going?
Nice to meet you. So my opening question to you would be, why is that a destructive thing? Why is that a bad thing when for a long time in this country, I feel personally that white men have had an advantage over some communities that have been discriminated against?
I want to say again that this premise is so flawed because she doesn't have policies that are directly saying, hey, Black and brown people specifically get this. She just has policies that will help everybody, and conversely will help Black and brown people more because they're the one that has the most economic disparity.
So why would you say that that is a destructive thing and not, maybe making up for lost time?
Sure. So let me explain what I mean by diversity, equity, and inclusion. So the basic theory of diversity, equity, and inclusion is spelled out by people like Richard Delgado, who's sort of one of the founders of, for example, critical race theory, is that essentially disparities equal discrimination. That if you see any disparity between one group in the United States and another group in the United States, that is the result of some exterior discrimination. It is not the result of individuals within that group acting differently. It's not the result of cultural differences. It's not the result of aggregated differences within individuals.
Oh, sorry. Did he say it's not the result of cultural differences? That is incorrect.
Than that group. And that to me is a failure of logic. It also is destructive in that it separates group from group, particularly in the United States, on the basis of race, which is not the best way of actually bringing Americans together or forming policy that is the best for all Americans.
Do you think there's room for nuance, perhaps, though? Like, yeah, maybe not everybody, but there certainly has been a large sect of people that has had it harder because of the color of their skin or their sexuality or their gender identity. Could you acknowledge that maybe there's, a middle ground there where it's not all, but there is some people who certainly have had a
Good point.
disadvantage?
I will say that history has consequences, obviously, and that if you are talking about historic marginalization of particular groups, that has consequences. The problem is that when you design policy in order to rectify for cosmic injustices or historic injustices, you actually have to try and measure out whether underperformance, say, economically, is due to those historic injustices. If so, how much? What is the corrective policy that is actually aimed at achieving best opportunity for all? The diversity, equity, and inclusion policies that are directed at separating race from race and then benefiting one race, for example, at the expense of another, ignore the fact that there are individuals within those groups, that history does not fall on everybody equivalent, that frankly, genetics and intelligence don't necessarily fall as on an individual level, right? You and I, we don't look the same. We might have different heights. We might have different qualities. That is just the way that God or nature has bestowed skill sets on everybody. What exactly is the government supposed to correct for? And if you took this entire group and you separate it in half, just draw a line anywhere. It's a circle, right? Anywhere you draw a line, you're going to get disparities between the two groups on either side of the line without regard to race, without regard to sex, and without regard to, for example, sexual
But does
orientation.
that mean
He's trying. Ben Shapiro right now is trying to generalize differences without recognizing the fact that historically some of those differences have caused some groups to have a superiority over other groups. Notice that he didn't even answer this man's question directly. He kind of skirted the answer and tried to say, "Oh, we're all different."
that hasn't played an effect in that story at all?
I'm not going to. No, you.
And also, again, he mentioned that if Kamala was creating laws for these individual groups, he thinks that's not fair, but she's not. So again, the premise is flawed.
Be a fool to claim that, that again, past injustices have no effect on what's happened today. Thanks so much. Watching guys gear up to run is really entertaining. That was so nice, everybody. Thank you.
So you believe that certain economic disparities between racial groups are caused as a result of cultural differences?
Sure.
And so what is the backing on this? What would you say contributes to your belief in that?
Okay, so not all cultures, for example, value studying in school the same. You can check this by the amount of hours that kids of particular culture study. So, for example, Korean Americans study a lot more than, for example, Latino Americans in terms of the number of hours that kids study. It would be hard to suggest what to attribute that to other than sort of parental guidance and what exactly the priorities are of the parents.
He's trying to generalize this, and you can't generalize the fact that there was a huge disproportionate tier system of white versus black in America's history. He's trying to ignore that, and you just can't.
This is true, by the way, between white people. Okay, so when I talk about disparities between groups, you can talk about white Appalachia, and there are very different values with regard to studying than there are for, say, upper-class white Americans who are living in Brooklyn, right? That's not the exact same thing. So cultural differences are not just racial differences. I think that anybody who attempts to sort of clumsily map that on and pretend that that's all the same, that's obviously not true. But cultural differences do explain an enormous amount of group disparities across incomes. To take a perfect example.
Oh, he's trying to generalize it.
So if you look at single motherhood rates, they're not equivalent across groups. Those are going to have massive differences with regard to outcomes for children. So if you're talking about cultural differences, again, cultural is just it was a rough way of saying how people act within a group on a large scale. And that is going to amount to some generalization, but that generalization is going to tend to, shall we say, concur. It's going to correlate very highly with outcome.
But culture is acclimated over time. It becomes a thing over time. And so do you not think that these historical disadvantages that certain ethnic groups have been through over time has created this culture where in which they're unable to put themselves ahead? You do say that Asian Americans are more likely to study, yes, but we have to take into account that after the Chinese Exclusion Act, Asian Americans were given a certain type of reparations which allowed them into the country. And in order for them, they were given visas, which allowed them to come in to the, yes, they were given easier processes into visas, yes, which allowed them into, no, it's a form of reparations, which they were once excluded from coming in. And so giving them an easier opportunity to attain these visas allowed them into the US. And mainly the individuals who were able to attain those were people with higher educations, which is why it may seem that Asian Americans within the country who come in typically with higher incomes as well as higher educational backgrounds, it may come off as that they are more studious than Latino Americans. But what we have to take into account is that Latin America and Hispanic people have faced a lot of tremendous setback due to historical atrocities. It's not their culture per se. What you see within...
Is there any individual agency in here, or is it all historic circumstance?
Everything is based off of history. Everything acclimates. Everything is an accumulation of history.
So to take the single motherhood example, for example...
The way...
That was fun anyway. Whoa. Hey, how's it going? How are you? Good to meet you.
So your basis is saying that culturally, people don't have the same advantages, right?
I'm saying that not every culture sort of initiates the same action within groups.
So in part, you're saying that you're part of each culture. You know what goes on in each culture to say these things.
No, I'm saying that I can analyze the activities of a particular group with reference to their actual behavior.
So if you go into my culture, we're told that we can achieve anything through hard work. We have to work 10 times harder. But you're not part of our culture, so you're explaining something that doesn't have to do with you. But in turn, you're saying that that culture, unfortunately, does not value the same thing that the next culture does.
So revealed preference tends to be a better way of doing social science than subjective perceptions.
Oh, here he goes with these words that he knows. Gosh, I hate when debaters do this. You're speaking to regular people, you have an expertise, and then you start using terms and phrases that you know that these normal people will probably not understand.
Revealed preference is how people act in the world. So for example, if you have one group of people who say, we really, really value our kids studying, and then their kids don't study at all, that would be a revealed preference.
Okay.
Everybody has
So then when you have people who say in corporate America, you have people who value nepotism versus actual studying hard. What is that called then?
Okay, so the idea that people generally value nepotism over studying hard, I'd like to see the evidence of that, given the fact
All right, just a quick fact check here. So nepotism is actually significant in the world. About a third of Americans work at the same company as a parent, and they got in because of their parents or family friend. They earn about 20% more on average than their peers without these connections, and it gives them like a nepotistic advantage. It's kind of like that not what you know, but who you know type of thing.
vast majority of wealth in this country is not created through nepotism or through inherited wealth.
But Donald Trump was given nepotism, was he not?
I mean, he's one example among a bajillion people who are very...
Yeah, it's not about whether most do. It's whether or not the number is significant, and the number is significant.
Very, very wealthy in this country. I'm very wealthy now. I certainly wasn't born very wealthy.
But then you can't speak on Donald Trump's experience, can you not?
That happens to be the case. Okay, I mean, you can laugh at my particular history, but I grew up in an 1,100 square foot home in Burbank, California, with 4 siblings in 1 bedroom.
And Burbank, hold on.
Sorry, go ahead.
In Burbank, I'm sorry, but in Burbank versus growing up in South Central, being told that you have to excel 10 times harder than the next person, but then you're not part of the culture, to say that you can actually come to these disparities is kind of far-sighted.
The idea that you have to work 10 times harder coming from South Central based on, for example, test scores is obviously not true. We've had affirmative action programs in this country for solidly 40 years.
But now affirmative action is gone. It's out the door.
Thank
now
God,
DEI is present.
So he acknowledges that affirmative action has helped people, Ben Shapiro, and yet he's glad that it's out of the door, which means that deep down he does know that there's cultural disparities going on here, but he doesn't want to directly acknowledge it.
DEI is actually saying that we need to have diversity, equity, inclusion. So you're actually putting a footing in the door for different races, different genders, different women, different men, everything. So now you're saying that because This program is going, this one isn't.
Sorry, you've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
Yeah, like a jackrabbit. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that.
Hi,
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. So, I kind of want to shift the conversation about DEI a little bit away from culture because I don't know if that's necessarily like a helpful conversation to have. And I really want to talk more about representation. So 1 in 5 Americans currently is Hispanic. This country, like it or not, is not a homogenous country. We are a very diverse country. Do you not think that our legislators should be representative of the overall population?
I don't see a way that you can have a quote unquote representative legislature with 435 members of Congress in a country of 340 million people, because you can divvy that up however you want. It's not by race. You could do it by sex. You could do it by gender. You do it by sexual orientation. How exactly do you decide what is quote unquote the representative group? And also, I don't believe that individuals ought to be represented based on group identity. So, for example, I'm Jewish. I don't. Jews are actually overrepresented in Congress. I don't think that we ought to decide exactly how many people in Congress are Jewish based on the Jewish population of the country.
I think she's asking who they represent in terms of who is in their representative districts.
That's actually a pretty silly way to do representation.
Well, we don't have to do it systematically, but fundamentally, there is an issue with the fact that we are not fully represented. Like, the entire population is not represented. We have never had a black female president. I still have to pay taxes.
We've never had a
the
Jewish
whole
president.
concept is no taxation without. Well, we have had a white male president. We've had like 45 of them.
Whether Jews count as white or not has been sort of an object of debate for quite a while. We do. Okay.
You do.
So,
Yes.
I mean, it depends according to whom, and that's a pretty recent development.
It doesn't depend according to whom. You are a white man. You could be Jewish and a white man.
Okay, so
Basically, everyone. It's a religion.
Judaism.
Do you not agree that you are a white man?
I mean, I think that it depends on the context in which you're discussing it.
So what are you, Ben? Are you not a white guy?
I mean, I'm a man of Jewish ethnicity, which is sometimes grouped with white and sometimes not. I mean,
No, you are a white man.
that's the more accurate way to put it. But when
What
we're
else would
talking
you be
about
grouped with?
Jews who are which is an
But it's-
ethnicity. I mean,
So
yeah.
you're not white at all.
I mean,
Jewish people is considered to be an ethno-religious group, meaning that it can be tied to ancestry and culture and all that. But you can be Jewish ethnically and still be a white man because white is a color of your skin. Also, things have to do not fully with just ethnicity and race, but rather racialization. So racialization is the way that people view you. And Ben Shapiro was definitely viewed as a white man. So she is 100% correct here.
again, it depends who's doing the grouping and how. I've seen Jews grouped with white and Jews grouped with not white. Are we just pretending that doesn't exist? That's a reality. However, as far as your generalized point, which is that we are supposed to identify people by group identity, that if we don't have a black female president, somehow black females have not been represented. So Barack Obama was in no way representative of black females because he's not a female.
No, he was. He was representative,
So
but
he was
that's
half
the point.
representative. How do you do the math on this? And why?
You shouldn't do the math on it completely statistically, but the fact
You shouldn't
is
do the math on it at all. You should
clearly
treat people as individuals.
underrepresented.
You should treat people as individuals.
Well, if you don't even want Kamala Harris to attempt to create DEI initiatives in office, then there isn't even going to be a conversation about it.
I mean, I don't think there ought to be a conversation about why we ought to be represented by race or by sex. I think that we are each individual people with individual ideas. And if that person represents my ideas, I don't care what sex, race, or sexual orientation they are.
I mean,
Yes, you do, because ethnically and culturally, you're probably going to tend to go with white people who represent your ideas because they align with you.
to an extent, yes.
No,
but there
entirely.
is an issue with the lack of empathy in office. We need to be able to empathize and legislate for the people that are living in this country.
I was not
Do you
aware.
not believe that?
I was not aware that empathy is relegated to particular race solidarity.
No, but I mean, it's easier to be empathetic towards people whose experiences you can fundamentally understand based on
Right.
your identity. Like, do you not
Exactly.
believe that people have an inherent bias?
So first of all, I'm
based
not
on
sure. I
identity?
mean, we can start with the empathy itself. I'm not sure that empathy is always the best basis for actual public policy, because when you have group solidarity and empathy based on group solidarity, you're going to attempt to actually benefit the group with whom you have solidarity. So that actually cuts against
But
generalized
that's like a
public
fundamental
policy.
thing that just exists, which is why we need representation in government. Okay, cute. Thank you.
He's so wrong on so many points.
Wow, he got it this time. All right, nice. Good to see you. How are you doing?
Doing all right.
Oh, this is the guy who debated the 25 Republicans.
Hi, how are you, Ben?
You know, it's been a day.
Yes, it's a little bit of like an interesting setting being surrounded by 20 people that disagree with you.
I mean, the truth is I grew up in LA and then I went to law school in Cambridge. So,
So
I'm
you
a
got a lot
little
more
used to it.
than
It's yeah. I've been here before.
Anyways, let's talk about DEI. Do you think that Trump should have won 2016? I'll wrap it in. It's conceptually relevant. I'll demonstrate the relevance.
Okay, sounds good. By what measure? Do I think he did win?
Ben Shapiro's being more careful here because he knows that Dean knows how to debate.
Or do I think he should have won?
Do you think he should have won?
I mean, yes, I'm happy that he won. If the question is, am I happy that he won? I'm happy that he won.
Okay. Well, I'd say that Trump won 2016 because
By the way, I did not vote for either candidate in 2016. That's a decision made in retrospect.
Awesome. So I think that Trump won 2016 because of a modality of DEI. Essentially, what I'd say is the Electoral College, right, strives for inclusion of smaller states with lower populations by overrepresenting them in the overall vote. Like, you could correct me if I'm wrong, or the SAN fact checkers can. I'm pretty sure that over the last 25 to 30 years, Republicans have won the presidency given the Electoral College, not given the overall popular vote. So if you're against DEI, if you don't want inclusion on the basis of race, inclusion on the basis of gender, or even what you're saying earlier, we could even say inclusion on the basis of class. Why do you want inclusion on the basis of population, rural areas, states, etc.?
We should actually use a better example. Why don't you just ask if I believe in the U.S. Senate? Right,
the U.S. Senate, this would also apply to the U.S. Senate.
Right, okay, so let's use the U.S. Senate because the U.S. Senate is actually even more unrepresentative of the general population than the Electoral College, which is at least a rough approximation.
It'd just be funnier to hear you say that you shouldn't have voted for Trump in 2016, but we could talk about the Senate
that's a different subject, but I'm very happy that he won, even though I didn't vote for I mean, we can talk about Trump later.
Yeah.
We've already done a bit. Well, I'm sure we'll do more. As far as the idea that every elected body has to be elected based on population as opposed to based on the area of geographic distribution or the states that actually pre-existed the federal government. Okay, the way that the Constitution of the United States was created was as a contract between sovereign states, which is one of the reasons why, for example, you have a United States Senate as opposed to just a House of Representatives. So is that a form of DEI? That seems like a stretch to me. Well, the kind of DEI that I'm talking about specifically would be separating human beings based on inherent characteristics, like, for example, race, as opposed to suggesting that the United States Senate, which is obviously unrepresentative of the general population.
Well, seemingly my point is
somehow bad. That's a check and balance, right?
Well, seemingly my point is that this is another modality of DEI. I've no problem with you explaining to me, right, why the Senate or the Electoral College would be given the U.S. Constitution and like some contractual agreement that they had between the sovereign states. That's fine. But what I'd say is that your claim here would just imply that the Constitution upholds DEI within our electoral processes.
If your claim is
so, do you think that the Constitution upholds DEI in the sense of including smaller states with less representative populations?
That is a true stretch of the meaning of DEI, but I get your point. I mean, if the idea is that the only thing that is not pure DEI in a democratic context would be sort of popularly represented votes, then I think you can make the case that basically you should get rid of every representative institution. We should go to a pure democracy because...
Well, I'm not making a case for what we should replace it with. I'm making the case that it would uphold DEI. We could talk about, right, what other systems should function in the case of the Electoral College or in the case of the Senate, but that's a completely different conversation than are these systems upholding DEI.
So again, I think that you're definitionally stretching DEI. If DEI is the basic idea that all disparities equal discrimination and must be rectified by government interventionism, which is sort of the definition, then stretching that to mean the Electoral College seems like you're going pretty far afield to defend a very broad concept as specifically badly applied.
Wait, 1 second. I don't think that we need to say that DEI is equivalent to disparities equal discrimination. We could just see that DEI is like a qualm for disparities in general, right? And what we apply here in this certain modality when we're talking about the Electoral College, when we're talking about the Senate, is we're trying to qualm the disparities of the lack of population in rural areas. We're trying to qualm the disparities of smaller states compared to larger states. And seemingly, you haven't really given me a response to this apart from calling it a stretch, but I do appreciate you for
no, I mean, it seems to me like the argument that you're making is that in order for there to be calm and sort of conciliation inside the United States, particular racial groups have to be given particular benefits. Okay, well, because that was the argument with regard to the states in the United States, right? When the Constitution was formed, the way that you came to an actual agreement in the Constitutional Convention is states were not going to sign on unless they got particular guarantees of the interests of those particular states, right? So if you're claiming that that's DEI, then the response that I would have is right, because that's how you have to come to an agreement. So if you're going to make the parallel argument with regard to DEI in, for example, the racial context, you then have to make the case that the only way that you can have conciliation in the United States is for particular racial groups to be given specific racial benefits.
They should be given specific racial benefits that raise them up to the level of other people who already have those benefits. That's why.
And otherwise, the country is going to split apart. which is an argument with which I generally disagree, even if I agreed with the way the Constitution was formed.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't see like your parallel here, right? I think that DEI could exist in multiple modalities. My argument in a nutshell is nothing more than the fact that we see disparities existing in rural areas compared to metropolitan areas. We see disparities existing in the size of a state and its overall population, and you're qualming these, and you're
right, but the DEI,
losing the
DEI response to that would not be
like through like an over representation.
And the DEI,
and I understand that your argument is, but my single-handed point here is that you would say, in some sense, that this is a reconciliation to introduce more to introduce more not diversity.
I mean, not
more representation and inclusion to something that is more disparate.
I mean, so if you'd make the concession that this is DEI, would you say in the same sense that we shouldn't have
I don't make
other
the concession
DEI
that falls
practices?
within the definition of DEI that I've used. And if your claim is that I'm now in favor of, for example, subsidies to rural areas at the expense of urban areas, I'm not actually.
So do you think that DEI would only apply in the context of race?
No, it could apply in the context of class. It could apply.
Okay, if it could apply in the context of race, class, and identity, why can't it apply in the context of a state's population and their representation in our government?
I mean, if they were to receive special bennies at the expense of other members of the population,
they are. Yes, like Alabama or Arkansas are literally receiving special benefits insofar as a greater level of representation in our Senate and in electoral processes compared to people in California. I mean, for instance, that's my buddy Parker over there. He lives in California. Right, and I live in Colorado. So I literally have more representation person for person in the sense of Parker's vote compared to my vote, because individualistically speaking, I'm from a state that has more representation, and the same thing could be said for multiple other states across America, especially in the Senate. There's 2 senators that represent me and everyone else in Colorado, and there's 2 senators that represent him and millions more people.
How are you getting from point
California.
A, which is that California has 2 senators and Colorado has 2 senators, to point B, which is that we
Oh man, he's cooking them.
should have incredible racial carve-outs on the basis of group identity at the behest of the federal government? That is a very, very large stretch. And to get from point A to point B on the basis of the constitutional structure seems like you're going pretty far afield. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but you know, the rubber band only goes so far.
That's the end of this claim.
That's great.
I appreciate you, man. Hopefully we could talk more.
I hear what you're saying.
All right. I think we're gonna go ahead and end it there. Yeah, I think Dean cooked him there at the end. That was not a stretch. I understand why he might argue that it's a stretch, because he may say that, oh, well, it's not about race. It's not race-based. It's not racialized. That's based on people in a particular area, and that's a stretch. But I don't think that it is stretch, because that's legislation that is created for a group that's underrepresented, and that's the same thing that DEI is for Black, Brown, LGBTQ, women, etc. Right? So, anyways, we're gonna end this one here. Hopefully, we'll get another one going for the next round of debaters. This is really fun stuff. Anyways, if you guys can, please like and subscribe. We finally did make it over 100 subscribers. So yeah, let's try to keep pushing that number up. Anyways, I'll catch you guys next time.